The blanket smells like motor oil and cold vinyl. Corinne Hale tucks it tighter around her son's shoulders in the back seat of the sedan and watches his eyes fight sleep the way only a child who does not trust the morning fights it. Brio is 9. He is wearing the same hoodie he wore yesterday and the day before. His sneakers are still on his feet. His school backpack is wedged between his knees like cargo he refuses to release, and the framed photograph of the three of them at the county fair sites propped against the window, where a pillow should be. It is 11:47 at night. The parking lot behind the Methodist Church on Birch Street is empty except for their car. The engine is off because gas costs money, and money left 3 weeks ago. The October air in Ashford, Tennessee is not freezing yet, but it is close enough to make the windshield fog from the inside, and Corinne keeps wiping it with the heel of her hand because a fogged car in a church parking lot at midnight is the kind of thing that draws police, and police draw questions. And questions draw the kind of attention that takes children away from mothers who have done nothing wrong except run out of options in the wrong order. Brio shifts. His elbow presses against the door handle. He mumbles something that sounds like "Dad," and Corinne's chest tightens so fast she has to press her fist against her sternum to keep the sound inside. Garrick has been dead for 41 days. 41 days since the hospice nurse checked the monitor for the last time and said, "He's comfortable now," which is what medical professionals say when they mean the body has stopped arguing with the disease. 41 days since Corinne held her husband's hand and felt the exact moment warmth became temperature. 41 days since she walked into the hallway of their apartment and told Brio, who was sitting on the floor with a textbook he was not reading, that his father was gone. The boy did not cry. He closed the textbook and placed it on the shelf and said, "Okay." That single word cost him something Corinne still cannot name. Since then, the world has moved with the efficiency of a machine that does not distinguish between grief and inconvenience. The sympathy cards came first, then the casseroles. And then the phone calls that started with, "How are you holding up?" and ended with, "Let me know if you need anything," which is the American way of offering help without committing to it. Within 2 weeks, the calls thinned. Within 3, they stopped. The rent notice came on day 29. She had known it was coming. Garrick's illness had taken his mechanic's income 18 months before it took him. Insurance covered some of the treatment. Some. The rest came from savings, then credit, then borrowing against the security deposit, then nothing. By the end, Corinne was buying groceries with coins pulled from the cup holder of the same sedan she is now sleeping in. The landlord, Mr. Keating, is not cruel. He is a man with a mortgage of his own and a patience that runs on a finite tank. He gave her 2 extensions. He knocked on the door with his hat in his hands and said, "I'm real sorry, Corinne, but I can't carry this much longer." She thanked him. She meant it. 3 days ago, he posted the final notice. Yellow paper, black ink, taped to the door at an angle that told her he had done it fast because doing it slow would have made him feel worse. She packed that night. Trash bags for the clothes, a cardboard box for Brio's books, the sedan's trunk for everything that would fit. The rest she left on the curb because there was no one to call and nowhere to bring it, and dignity, she has learned, is the first thing poverty asks you to set down. Now she is here, in a parking lot, with a 9-year-old boy who sleeps in his shoes because he has already learned that safety is not guaranteed, and a gas tank showing 1/4, and a phone with 14% battery, and a dead husband whose family told her 3 days ago that her suffering was not their responsibility. That conversation is the reason she is here instead of anywhere else. Because Corinne did the one thing grief tells you never to do. She asked for help from people who had already decided she did not deserve it. And what Garrick's mother said to her in that living room, under a framed cross-stitch that read, "Family is everything," is the reason Corinne Hale now believes that some people use the word family the same way they use the word prayer, loudly, publicly, and without any intention of following through. She had gone to them not for money, not for rescue, just for time, a week, maybe 2, enough to find work in a room and the smallest foothold a widow can stand on. What she got instead was something she will carry for the rest of her life. I should have known from the driveway. Lorene's house always looks like it is being photographed. The lawn is edged with the kind of precision that only comes from a man who has nothing important to do and all day to do it. The flower beds are mulched in that deep red cedar that smells like a furniture catalog. There's a flag by the front door, not the country's flag, a decorative one, seasonal. Autumn leaves and a pumpkin. It says blessed in cursive. I parked Garrick's sedan behind Wade's truck and sat there for a full minute. Brio was in the back seat doing math homework on a clipboard because I had told him we were visiting Grandma Lorene and he needed to be on his best behavior, which is something mothers say when they already know the visit is going to hurt. Lorene answered in a cashmere cardigan and reading glasses pushed up on her head. Her smile arrived on schedule. Lips first, then the rest of the face, but the eyes stay a half second behind, and if you are paying attention, you can see the audit happening. She's looking at my shoes, my coat. She's measuring how far I've fallen since the funeral. Corinne, come in. Wade's in the den. The house smelled like cinnamon plugins and leather polish. Every surface says the same thing. I have enough and I maintain it, and the maintenance is the point. Wade was in the recliner, Garrick's older brother. Same jawline, thicker build, none of the gentleness. He looked at me the way you look at a bill you forgot to pay. I'm not asking for money, I said. I needed that sentence out first because I knew how this family counted favors. I just need a little time, a week, maybe 2, enough to find something stable. And if Brio could stay here while I sort things out, just so he has a routine and a bed and meals at a table, I would be grateful. Lorene folded her hands in her lap. She does that when she is about to say something designed to sound generous while doing the work of a closed door. Corinne, honey, I hear you, and I admire that you're trying. I really do. But I think hardship can be character building, don't you? Garrick always said you were resourceful. She used my dead husband's name to compliment me out of asking for help. That takes a specific kind of skill. Wade leaned forward. Look, nobody's saying this isn't tough, but Garrick had problems with planning. That's no secret. And you chose to stay home all those years. I'm not judging, but decisions have consequences. I want to be clear about what just happened. A man whose brother died of cancer 41 days ago just told the widow that her caregiving was a poor financial decision. He said it in the den of a paid-off house, under a ceiling fan that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, with a college football game muted on a 70-inch television. I looked at Lorene. I'm asking for help with your grandson, that's all? Lorene smiled, the same smile, the one that has never once reached her eyes in the 10 years I have known her. Brio is welcome to visit, but taking on a child full-time, even temporarily, that's a big commitment. Have you looked into shelters? Some of them have programs for mothers in transition. Mothers in transition. That was the phrase she chose, as if I were changing careers instead of sleeping in a car. Wade nodded. The county has resources. You should look into it. Learn how the real world works. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my face was not. I've learned that about myself in the last 41 days. The body absorbs what the face refuses to show. Thank you for your time, I said. I said it exactly the way you say it when you mean the opposite, but you have a child in the next room and you cannot afford to let him hear his mother scream at the people who were supposed to be his family. I collected Brio from the kitchen table where he had been sitting quietly with his clipboard, solving problems on paper because the problems outside the paper had become too large for a 9-year-old to solve. We walked to the car. I buckled my seatbelt. I checked the mirrors. I pulled out of the driveway at a reasonable speed. I drove 4 blocks to the parking lot of a Walgreens. I parked. I turned the engine off, and then I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let my body do what my face had refused to do in that living room. Brio did not say anything. He reached forward from the back seat and placed his hand on my shoulder. 9 years old, palm flat, fingers steady. He held it there until I stopped shaking. 3 days later, Mr. Keating posted the final notice on the apartment door. I packed our life into trash bags and loaded them into the sedan and drove away from the only home my son had ever known. And the woman in the rearview mirror did not look like someone who had been helped by family. She looked like someone who had just been measured, found insufficient, and released back into a world that keeps its shelters full and its guest rooms empty. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it before you answer. If your son or your daughter or someone you love knocked on your door tomorrow, not asking for money, just asking for a safe place to breathe for 1 week, would you let them in? Or would you smile and suggest they try the county? If your chest just tightened, maybe that answer needs more than a thought. Maybe it needs a change. Subscribe so this story finds you again, because what happens next is for everyone who has ever been turned away by the people who were supposed to stay. The library opens at 9. Corinne is standing outside at 8:43 with Brio beside her. Both of them carrying the specific kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep, but from the effort of pretending sleep happened. She has a coffee from the gas station across the street. He has a granola bar. They look to anyone passing like a mother and son waiting for the building to open so the boy can check out a book. Nobody would guess they brushed their teeth with bottled water in a church parking lot 30 minutes ago. This is the second morning. Last night, Corinne drove to 3 different parking spots before settling on the lot behind the hardware store on Route 9. She chose it because the overhead light was burned out and the angle of the building blocked the car from the street. She is learning the geography of invisibility the way other women learn school districts and commute times. Which lots have cameras? Which neighborhoods have patrol cars? Which gas stations have clean enough bathrooms that a 9-year-old boy can wash his face without touching a surface that makes his mother want to cry? Brio has not complained, not once. That is the part that does the most damage. He carries his backpack everywhere. Inside it are his textbook, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and the framed photograph. He holds the straps with both hands. He walks close to Corinne. He watches her face the way children watch weather, reading the forecast before the sky says anything official. The library doors open. They walk in. Corinne finds a table near the back and plugs her phone into the outlet beneath the window. 14%. The charging cord is frayed and she has to hold it at an angle to make the connection, which means she sits with her left hand pinching a cord and her right hand scrolling job listings on a screen that keeps dimming to save power. She applies to 7 positions in 90 minutes. Retail, front desk at a motel, warehouse sorting, a daycare center. She has a college degree in early childhood education that she has not used in 6 years because she spent those years keeping a man alive and a child fed. None of that appears on a resume. Brio sits across from her reading a book about planets. He is not reading it. He is holding it open and staring at the same page he has been staring at for 20 minutes. Corinne notices. She does not say anything. There are silences between a mother and child that are more honest than any conversation, and this is one of them. At 11:15 a.m., she refreshes her inbox. There is one new email. The subject line reads, "Probate matter. Property transfer. Haywood County, North Carolina." Corinne almost deletes it. The internet is full of scams dressed as legal language, and she does not have the emotional bandwidth to be disappointed by something pretending to be real. But her thumb hesitates over the screen. The email is from a county clerk's office, not a law firm, not a bank, a government address with a .gov extension. It references property records, a verified descendant search, and names that Corinne has not heard spoken aloud in over a decade. Odessa Vale, Mercer Vale, her mother's parents, her grandparents. Corinne's mother died when Corinne was 19. Her father had been gone before that. With them went most of the family stories, the kind that get told at kitchen tables and carried forward by people who bother to listen. What little Corinne remembers comes in fragments. A mountain house, somewhere in North Carolina. Something about silence after 1950. A property that the family stopped talking about, not because of shame exactly, but because some pains harden into rules, and the rule in Corinne's family was simple. Do not go back. Do not ask why. She opens the email fully. It is 2 paragraphs. It says that as the nearest verified living descendant of Odessa and Mercer Vale, she is entitled to a property parcel in Haywood County, western North Carolina. The property includes a residential structure surrounding acreage and associated land rights. A key and access instructions are being mailed to her last known address. Corinne reads it twice. Then she looks at Brio, who is still holding his book about planets and staring at a page about Saturn's rings as if the distance between here and there is the only math that makes sense right now. She has no money, no apartment, no job, no family willing to help, and an email from a county clerk is telling her she owns a house on a mountain that has been sealed for 74 years. It does not feel like rescue. It feels like the kind of joke the universe tells when it has run out of cruelty and is trying irony instead. But a sealed house, even a ruined one, has walls. And walls are more than a sedan has. The mailing address on file is the apartment she no longer lives in. The key is probably sitting in a mailbox she no longer has access to. Corinne picks up her phone and calls the county clerk's office directly. The woman at the clerk's office speaks slowly, the way people in rural county offices do when they have all day and assume you do too. Her name is Patsy. She confirms the property. She confirms the names. She tells Corinne that the parcel has been sitting in unresolved probate since the last family claimant failed to appear in 1987, and that a periodic records review flagged the property for descendant notification 6 months ago. Corinne's name surfaced through a combination of birth records, marriage filings, and the kind of cross-referencing that only a board county office with a digitized archive and too much time would bother to complete. "You're the only match we found," Patsy says. "Direct maternal line. Odessa Vale through your mother, Elaine through you." "What condition is the house in?" Corinne asks. "Honey, I couldn't tell you. Nobody's been up there in decades as far as I know. It's got a road, kind of, and the taxes were prepaid through a trust mechanism your grandmother set up before she passed. That's the only reason it wasn't seized. She was thorough about that." Thorough. The word sticks. Corinne does not remember Odessa being described as thorough. She does not remember Odessa being described at all. The woman existed in her family the way weather exists in a region you have never visited. You know it is there. You know it affects things, but you have never felt it on your skin. Patsy offers to mail a new key to a current address. Corinne does not have a current address. She asks if she can pick it up in person. "Sure thing. Office is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. Bring a photo ID." Corinne hangs up and stares through the library window at the parking lot where her sedan sits with everything she owns packed into its trunk and back seat. The drive from Ashford, Tennessee to Haywood County, North Carolina, is 4 hours and 38 minutes according to her phone. That is roughly a quarter tank of gas she does not have the money to replace. But staying costs more, not in dollars, and the kind of currency that drains from a woman who sleeps sitting up and wakes to find her son already awake, watching her, making sure she is still breathing. She has $43. She fills the tank with 31 of them and buys Brio a sandwich and an apple juice from the gas station cooler. He eats in the front seat this time because Corinne tells him he can. And that small promotion from back seat to front seat is the first decision she has made in a week that feels like it belongs to her. They drive east. The highway runs through flat fields and strip malls and then begins to climb. The trees change first. Maple and elm give way to hickory and oak, and then, as the elevation rises, to pine and spruce that stand so close together, the road narrows into a corridor of green and gray. The sky drops lower. Brio watches the mountains appear. He has been quiet since the car became their home, but this quiet is different. This is the quiet of a boy trying to decide whether hope is safe or whether it is just another thing that will be taken away. "Mom? Is it a real house?" "I think so." "With rooms?" "That's what they said." "And we can stay?" Corinne grips the steering wheel. "We can stay." She says it with more certainty than she owns because that is what mothers do. They lend conviction to their children when their own reserves are empty. The GPS leads them off the highway onto a county road. The county road becomes a rural route. The rural route becomes gravel. The gravel becomes mud. At one point, the road is so narrow that branches scrape both sides of the sedan, and Corinne has to reverse twice to navigate a switchback that was clearly designed for vehicles shorter than the 21st century. Brio's hand finds the door handle, not to open it, to hold it, the way a child holds something when the world is moving faster than his ability to process it. They round a final bend where the road flattens into a clearing choked with mountain laurel and tall brown grass, and the house appears. It stands at the base of a wooded slope, like something the mountain grew and then forgot about. 2 stories. Gray weathered boards, a stone foundation thick enough to survive a century. The porch wraps around the front and sags on the left side. A turret rises from the right corner, its conical roof missing several shingles but still holding its shape. The windows are shuttered from the inside. A heavy iron bar crosses the front door, rusted orange but not broken. Pine trees rise behind the house. The ground is covered in fallen needles and moss and stone. There is no mailbox, no driveway marker, no evidence that anyone has approached this structure in years. The silence is enormous. Not empty silence. Full silence. Brio whispers, "Did somebody really live here?" Corinne does not answer right away. She stands at the edge of the clearing with her son's hand in hers and looks at the house the way you look at something that is either a gift or a trap, and you cannot yet tell which. "Yes," she says, "somebody endured here." The key from the county clerk's office fits the padlock on the iron bar. She turns it. The lock opens. She lifts the bar and sets it against the porch rail. The front door is swollen with moisture and age. She pushes it with her shoulder. It holds. She pushes harder. It gives. And the air that rolls out of that house is dry and cold and carries a smell that stops Corinne where she stands. Cedar, dust, old fabric, something faintly metallic, like iron or blood rust or the inside of a locked toolbox that has been sealed since the year her grandmother decided the world outside was no longer safe enough for what was inside. The house exhales. Corinne inhales. And neither of them will ever be the same. The first thing she sees is the rocking chair. It sits near the stone hearth at the center of the main room, angled slightly toward the window, as if whoever sat there last had been watching the road. A folded shawl rests on its back, wool, dark green with a pattern of small white stitches that look handmade. The fabric is dusty, but intact. The chair itself does not creak. The runners rest flat against the wide plank floor in the exact position where they were left when someone stood up and walked away from this room sometime in 1950 and never came back. Corinne steps inside. The floorboards give slightly under her weight, but hold. The air is cold and still, and carries the kind of silence that exists only in places that have been sealed from weather and time and human sound for decades. It is not frightening. It is disciplined. The house does not feel empty. It feels held. Brio stands in the doorway. He does not enter immediately. He holds the door frame with one hand, his backpack straps gripped in the other, his eyes moving across the room. He is measuring, deciding. At 9 years old, he has already learned that new places are not automatically safe. "You can come in," Corinne says. Her voice sounds different inside this room, lower, rounder. The house absorbs sound the way stone absorbs heat. Brio steps over the threshold. The main room is larger than Corinne expected. A stone fireplace dominates the far wall, its mantel bare except for a tin candle holder with a stub of wax still in it. To the left, a doorway leads into what was once a kitchen. Corinne can see the edge of a cast-iron stove, the kind with a flat top and heavy grate doors, and open shelving lined with glass jars still filled with something dark and granular. Dried beans, maybe, or coffee, or soil. She cannot tell from here, and she is not ready to touch anything yet. To the right, a narrow staircase rises to the second floor. The treads are wide oak, darkened with age, and each one carries a thin layer of dust so undisturbed it looks like gray velvet. No footprints, no animal tracks. Nothing has walked these stairs in 74 years. Corinne moves through the main room slowly. She passes a wooden bench pushed against one wall. A pair of boots sits beneath it, men's boots, cracked leather, laces still tied. The kind of boots a man would have worn to work in a mine or to clear brush on a mountainside. Mercer's boots. They have to be. The man has been dead for 74 years, and his boots are still laced and waiting beside the bench where he left them. She touches nothing. She walks the way people walk in churches, carefully, with the awareness that something sacred may be underfoot, even if you cannot name it. The kitchen is small and organized with a precision that makes Corinne's throat tighten. The jars on the shelves are arranged by size. A wooden rack near the stove holds cast iron skillets, 3 of them, graduated, hanging from hand-forged hooks. A cutting board sits on the counter with a knife beside it, blade pointing away from the edge. You know the way someone who cooks seriously always places a knife. There is a ceramic pitcher with a crack running down its side but still standing upright. A cloth napkin, folded once, sits beside it as if someone stepped away to answer a knock at the door and never returned to finish the meal. Brio has followed her into the kitchen. He's looking at the jars. "Mom, there's stuff in those." "I know. Like real stuff. From a long time ago." "Yes." "Somebody kept this clean." He is right. The dust is there, thick and gray, but beneath it the surfaces are ordered. The shelves are level. The cookware is arranged. Nothing has fallen. Nothing has tipped or rotted or collapsed into the kind of chaos that abandoned houses usually produce within a few years. This house was not left in a hurry. It was closed with intention. Whoever sealed it took the time to arrange what remained, as if they were setting a table they expected someone to eventually sit down at. Corinne walks back through the main room and up the staircase. Each step groans but holds. At the top, a short hallway leads to 2 rooms. The first is a bedroom, a metal frame bed with a bare mattress, a wooden dresser with a mirror that has fogged at the edges, and a window shuttered from inside with a plank of smoothed pine. On the dresser top sits a Bible, closed, with a dried wildflower pressed flat between its pages, the stem still visible, the petals turned to brown paper. The second room is smaller, a child's room, a narrow bed with a quilted cover folded at the foot, a shelf with 3 books, spines cracked, a tin puzzle on the floor, its pieces scattered in a pattern that does not look random. It looks like a child was in the middle of solving it and then was taken away from this room before the picture was complete. Corinne stands in the doorway of that room and feels something inside her chest fracture. Not break, fracture. The way a bone weakens before it gives. Because this room held a child, this house held a family, and someone sealed both of them shut and walked away carrying the kind of grief that does not ask for sympathy because sympathy was never going to be enough. She goes back downstairs. Brio is sitting on the bench in the main room. His backpack is on the floor beside him. His sneakers are flat on the planks. He looks up at her with an expression she has not seen since before Garrett got sick. Not hope exactly. Something earlier than hope. Something like the willingness to wait and see. "Is this ours?" he asks. "Yes." "For real?" "For real?" He looks at the rocking chair, at the shawl, at the hearth with its stub of candle wax. It feels like somebody left it for us. Corinne does not correct him. Because standing in this room, in this house that smells like cedar and dust, and 74 years of deliberate silence, she has the same feeling. Not that the house was abandoned, but that it was sealed the way a letter is sealed, closed and addressed and sent forward in time to whoever was wounded enough to open it. And what Corinne does not yet know, what she will discover when she opens the pantry door and finds the cloth-wrapped ledger books and the drawer beneath the stairs, is that Odessa Vale did not leave this house by accident. She left it on purpose. For a season exactly like this one. The second letter was folded inside the back cover of the first ledger, pressed flat between pages so tightly that Corinne almost missed it. She had been sitting at the oak kitchen table for 2 hours. The light outside was fading. The mountain pushed shadow through the shuttered windows in long gray bars that stretched across the floor. Brio had fallen asleep on the floor of the front room, curled on the shawl from the rocking chair, his backpack under his head, his shoes still on. Corinne had gone through the first ledger page by page. Odessa's handwriting was meticulous, every entry dated, every transaction described in language specific enough to stand up in a county records office, tax payments recorded to the penny, timber assessments with board foot estimates and species notations. Weir Springwater rights documented with seasonal flow measurements, easement agreements with 3 neighboring properties, each one signed, witnessed, and cross-referenced with survey plot numbers. The woman had been running a one-person land office out of a mountain pantry, and she had done it with the discipline of someone who understood that paper is the only thing that survives when people decide to take what belongs to you. The second letter explained why. Corinne unfolded it carefully. The paper was thinner than the first letter, almost translucent in places where the ink had soaked through. The handwriting was the same but smaller, tighter, as if Odessa had been writing faster, or writing while something pressed against her from the inside. I am writing this the winter after Mercer died. They say it was an accident. A timber collapse at the mine entrance. 3 men were working that section, and 2 of them walked away. Mercer did not. The company paid the other 2 families within a month. They have not paid me. They sent a man named Eldon Prather to the house 3 times offering to buy the land instead. The first time he was polite. The second time, he brought a lawyer. The third time, he told me a woman alone on a mountain with no income would be making a mistake not to sell while the offer was generous. I told him I would burn this house before I let a company that killed my husband profit from the ground he walked on. Corinne's hands went still on the paper. The letter continued. Prather stopped coming after that. But the pressure did not stop. The county assessor raised the property tax valuation by 40% in a single year. CRS. A surveyor I did not hire appeared on the north boundary with instruments and told me the line had been redrawn. I went to the courthouse and found the original survey filed by Mercer's father in 1921. The line had not moved. Someone had filed a competing survey using coordinates that cut 11 acres off our parcel. I had the original documents. They had manufactured ones. That is how it works. They do not steal land with guns anymore. They steal it with paper. Corinne set the letter down and looked at the pantry. Odessa had not sealed this house out of grief. She had sealed it out of war. She had taken every original document, every deed, every survey, every tax receipt, and every letter, and she had locked them inside the only place she trusted, the house itself. Then she left. Not because she was running, because she understood that staying alone on a mountain where powerful men wanted her land was not bravery. It was suicide dressed as stubbornness. She had separated the records intentionally, the ledger books in the pantry, the deeds in the drawer under the stairs, the wooden box and the metal lockbox deeper in the pantry, still unopened. She had distributed the evidence the way a person distributes weight across a bridge, so that no single point of failure could collapse the whole structure. And she had written the warning. If this house reaches you in a season of humiliation, do not sell quickly. Humiliation makes cheap bargains look like rescue. Corinne now understood that line differently. Odessa was not speaking generally. She was speaking from experience. She had been humiliated, widowed, pressured, us threatened with manufactured paper and raised taxes, and a man named Prather who came to her door 3 times with decreasing patience. And she had refused every offer because she understood that what they were buying was not just land. They were buying the silence that comes after a family gives up. Corinne opened the wooden box. Inside was a second set of deeds, not copies. Originals with older dates going back to 1904 when Mercer's father, Josiah Vale, had first filed on the parcel. These deeds describe the full property. Not 47 acres, as the county probate summary had stated, but 63 acres, including a ridge section that contained the freshwater spring and a north-facing slope dense with old-growth black walnut. 16 acres had been erased from the county records. 16 acres that Odessa's documents proved still belonged to the Vale family. Corinne opened the metal lockbox. Inside were 3 more items. A folded survey map, hand-drawn but professionally measured, showing the original 63-acre boundary. A handwritten appraisal of the black walnut stand from 1949, estimating the timber value at what would have been a significant sum at the time. And a third letter, shorter than the others, written in a hand that shook slightly, as if Odessa had been cold or old, or both, when she wrote it. To whoever opens this box, you now hold the proof. Do not let them take it from you the way they tried to take it from me. The spring alone is worth more than anything they will offer. The walnut will be worth more in 50 years than it is today. Do not cut it all. Do not sell it fast. Do not let grief or panic make your decisions. I did not seal this house to hide from the world. I sealed it to protect you from the people who will smile while they rob you. Corinne pressed both palms against the table. She pressed until the wood pushed back. She pressed until her arms shook and her chest hurt, and the sound that came out of her was not a sob, but something older and deeper, a sound women make when they discover they have been understood by someone they will never meet. Brio stirred in the front room, but did not wake, and Corinne sat in the kitchen of a dead woman's house, surrounded by 74 years of hidden records, and realized for the first time since Garrick died that she was not worthless. She had simply been looking at the wrong ledger. The county survey office in Waynesville opened at 8:30 on a Thursday morning, and Corinne was standing at the door at 8:17 with a manila folder in one hand and a gas station coffee in the other. She had not slept well. The mountain house held temperature the way stone holds temperature, slowly and completely, and the October nights were cold enough to make breathing visible. She and Brio had slept downstairs in the front room, wrapped in aired-out blankets that smelled like cedar and old wool, with the door closed and every window still shuttered. The house creaked all night, not from decay, from the particular settling sounds a structure makes when weight shifts inside it for the first time in decades. The house was adjusting to their presence the way a body adjusts to movement after a long sleep. A clerk named Arden Stokes processed the survey dispute. He was young, maybe 30, with a thin beard and the careful manner of a man who had been trained to move slowly through government paperwork and had internalized the rhythm so completely it had become his personality. Corinne spread the documents on the counter. The original 1904 filing by Josiah Vale, the hand-drawn survey map, the property deeds showing 63 acres, and beside them, the county's current records showing 47 acres. Arden looked at both sets. He looked at them for a long time. These originals are in remarkable condition, he said. The filing numbers match our pre-1940 index. If these are authentic, and they look authentic, there's a 16-acre discrepancy between what was originally filed and what the county currently shows. How does that happen? Arden removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. It happens when someone files a competing survey and nobody challenges it. In the 40s and 50s, mining companies did this more than people realize. They'd commission a private surveyor, file new boundaries with the county, and if the original landowner didn't contest it within the statutory period, the new survey became the record. Can it be challenged now? If you have the originals and they predate the competing survey, yes, it takes time. You'll need a licensed surveyor to verify the boundaries on the ground, but the documentation you have here is strong, stronger than most. Corinne folded the papers and placed them back in the folder. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was set. Something had changed in the way she held her body, a shift so slight that only someone who had been watching her for days would notice. She stood straighter. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was level. She was not performing confidence. She was experiencing the physical sensation of a woman who, for the first time in years, possessed information that other people wanted. That is a different kind of strength than the strength people praised her for during Garrick's illness. That strength was endurance. This was agency. And the difference between those two things is the difference between surviving a flood and learning to redirect the water. She drove back up the mountain. A retired surveyor named Emmett Harlow lived on a ridge 3 miles from the Vale property. When Noreen at the probate office had mentioned him, Corinne found his house by the mailbox, a hand-painted wooden plaque that read, Harlow, Licensed Surveyor, RET, with a faded illustration of a transit level underneath. Emmett was 78, white-haired, hands like tree roots. He answered the door in overalls and a flannel shirt, and looked at Corinne with the particular expression of a man who recognized a family name before the face attached to it. Vale? You, Odessa's people? Her granddaughter. Well, I'll be. Come in. He looked at the documents for 40 minutes. He compared them against a topographic map he kept in a roll-top desk that had not been opened, based on the dust pattern, in at least 5 years. He made notes on a legal pad with a pencil he sharpened twice during the conversation. Your grandmother was right, he said. Oh, this boundary has been wrong on the county map since '53. I can walk the line for you next week if the weather holds. Won't charge you for the first walkthrough. Odessa's people shouldn't have to pay to prove what's already theirs. Corinne thanked him. She shook his hand. She drove back down the mountain road, past the laurel and the bare hardwood and the creek that ran beside the road like a companion that refused to leave, and she pulled into the muddy clearing in front of the house and sat in the car for 5 full minutes before going inside. She was not overwhelmed. She was recalibrating. The world she had been living in for the last 2 months was a world where she had nothing. No home, no money, no family willing to help, no plan that extended past the next gas station. That world had felt permanent. It had felt like the truth, but it was not the truth. It was a story told to her by circumstances and by people whose cruelty had been so consistent that she had started believing it was accurate. Odessa's documents told a different story, a story where Corinne Vale Hale was not broke. She was the inheritor of 63 acres, a freshwater spring, a stand of old-growth walnut, and a house that had been sealed not in shame, but in strategy. She went inside. Brio was sitting at the kitchen table, counting mason jars again. He looked up when she came through the door. Mama, there's 47 jars. I know, baby. Is that a lot? Corinne hung the car key on the nail beside the front door. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable. But it was the first time since they arrived that she had treated the house like a place where things could be put down and expected to be there in the morning. It's enough, she said. A roofer named Clayton Suggs showed up the following Monday in a truck older than the house, with a ladder strapped to the cab and a dog sitting in the passenger seat that watched Corinne with the calm judgment of an animal that has seen a lot of people and has opinions about most of them. Clayton was mid-50s, broad across the shoulders, with a sunburn that looked permanent and hands that had been shaking roofs since the Clinton administration. He walked the perimeter of the house slowly, touching the siding the way a mechanic touches the body of a car he respects, pressing his thumb against the porch posts, crouching to examine the stone foundation, tilting his head at the turret roof the way a man tilts his head at an engine that should not still be running but is. Odessa Vale's place, he said. Not a question. My daddy did work up here in the '40s, replaced the porch boards before the war. He looked at Corinne. You her blood? Granddaughter. Clayton nodded. He climbed the ladder and spent 20 minutes on the roof. When he came down, he brushed his hands on his jeans and gave his report. Main roof is sound. Somebody built this thing to last, and they were right. Turret needs patching where the moss got under the shingles. Flashing around the chimney needs replacing. Porch roof is the worst of it, sagging because the support beam cracked. I can fix all of it in 4 days. What does it cost? Clayton looked at the house, then at her, and then at the car in the clearing with the trash bag still visible in the trunk and a fleece blanket wadded in the back seat. Pay me when you can. Odessa's granddaughter shouldn't have to choose between a roof and groceries. Corinne started to argue. She had been poor long enough to understand that accepting charity from strangers created a debt that could not always be repaid in currency. But Clayton was not offering charity. He was offering credit. The kind that exists in small mountain towns where a family name carries more weight than a credit score, and where people remember who built what and who stood where and who got hurt by whom. She accepted. While Clayton worked on the roof, Corinne worked on the house. She started with the kitchen. She scrubbed the counters with water hauled from the spring, which flowed cold and clear from a rock outcropping 200 yards behind the house, and tasted like the earth had been filtering it through stone since before the town was founded. She washed the mason jars one by one, lining them on the counter like soldiers returning to formation. She found enough usable cookware in the pantry, a cast iron Dutch oven, 2 pots with lids, a bread pan, and a set of tin plates to make soup from canned goods she bought at a dollar store in town. The first hot meal she served Brio in that house was chicken noodle soup from a can, heated in a 70-year-old pot, served on a tin plate that had held Odessa's food during the Truman administration. It was the best meal either of them had eaten in weeks. Not because of the flavor, because of the table, because of the walls. Because of the ceiling between them and the sky. Brio ate 2 full servings. He did not ration, he did not chew slowly. He ate the way a child eats when the emergency has paused long enough for hunger to arrive without apology. Corinne watched him and held herself very still. Because the difference between her son rationing peanut butter crackers in a gas station parking lot 3 days ago and her son eating soup at a table with walls around him was not distance. It was structure, a roof, a door that locks, a table heavy enough to feel permanent. That night, Brio slept in the front room again. He wore his clothes, he kept his backpack within arm's reach. But for the first time, he took his shoes off before lying down. He placed them neatly beside the blanket, toes pointing forward, laces tucked inside. They're arranged with the deliberateness of a child who is making a decision about safety without knowing he is making it. Corinne saw the shoes and her knees almost buckled, because children do not measure security with speeches or bank statements or legal documents filed in county offices. They measure it by whether they can unpack, by whether they can take off their shoes and trust that the floor beneath them will still be there at dawn, by whether the adults around them have stopped moving long enough for stillness to feel safe instead of dangerous. Brio's shoes sitting beside the blanket were not a gesture. They were a verdict. He had looked at the walls and the door and the table and the soup in his mother's face, and he had decided in the private courtroom where 9-year-olds make their most important rulings that this house might hold, that the ground might stay, that his mother, who had been running and driving and folding and rationing and pretending for weeks, had finally landed somewhere heavy enough to stop. Corinne turned off the lantern. She lay on the floor beside her son and stared at the ceiling she could not see. Clayton's hammer would arrive in the morning. The mountain was quiet except for the creek running somewhere below the ridge, carrying water that had been moving through these rocks since before any of this mattered to anyone. She did not sleep for a long time, not because of fear, because she was afraid to close her eyes and lose the image of those shoes placed neatly beside the blanket. It was the most beautiful thing she had seen since the county fair photograph. And 3 weeks changed the house the way 3 weeks changes a wound that has finally been cleaned and covered. Clayton finished the roof. The turret shingles held. The chimney flashing stopped the leak that had been slowly dripping into the upstairs hallway, leaving a stain on the plaster ceiling that Corinne left untouched because it reminded her that even sealed houses take damage, and that damage, when addressed, does not have to be fatal. Emmett Harlow walked the property boundary on a Tuesday with his transit level and a thermos of coffee he shared with Corinne at the halfway point while Brio explored the North Ridge. Emmett confirmed what the documents promised. The original boundary enclosed 63 acres. The competing survey from 1953 had removed 16 acres, including the spring and the best walnut. He marked the correct boundary with orange flagging tape. "This won't be instant," he said. "County bureaucracy moves like cold honey, but the documentation is clean. You'll get your acres back. It's just a matter of when." Corinne nodded. She had stopped needing things to be instant. Instant was the currency of panic. She was learning a different economy now, one that ran on patience and records, and the willingness to let time work in her favor rather than against her. She began protecting the spring. She cleared the brush around the outcropping and built a rough catch basin from stones she gathered on the slope. The water was clean enough to drink without treatment, even tested by a county health inspector named Margot, who drove up the mountain on a Wednesday and filled 3 sample bottles and came back 2 days later with results that showed mineral content well within safe limits and a pH that was, in her words, about as perfect as mountain water gets. The walnut stand was a different kind of asset. Corinne walked it with Emmett. 41 trees. The largest had trunks 3 feet across and canopies that blocked the sky in a cathedral pattern that made the forest floor dark and cool even at midday. Black walnut was valuable timber. A single tree of that size could be worth $10,000 or more to the right buyer. 41 trees represented real money, but Odessa's letter was specific. Do not cut it all. Do not sell it fast. Corinne understood why. No, a woman desperate for cash would strip the walnut and take the lump sum and feel rescued for 6 months before the money ran out and the land sat empty and the long-term value was gone forever. That was what humiliation did. It made people sell their futures to fix their present, and it called the transaction wisdom. She would not do that. She would have 3 trees assessed for selective harvest, enough to cover Clayton's bill, repair the plumbing, and buy supplies for the winter. The rest would stand. The rest would grow. The rest would be there for Brio. She started cooking real meals, not from cans, from ingredients bought at the farmer's market in town, where a woman named Shelby sold eggs and butter and squash, and looked at Corinne with the frank curiosity of a local who recognizes a newcomer with an old family name and is deciding how much history to share and how much to hold back. Brio changed. Not overnight. Not the way movies show, where one good meal and a soft bed rewrites a child's nervous system in a single scene. Real change in children is slower and stranger than that. It shows up in posture before it shows up in words. It shows up in where they put their hands, in how they close doors, in whether they walk through a room or move through it like a guest who expects to be asked to leave. Brio started walking through rooms. He stopped keeping his backpack within reach at all times. He left it on the floor by the front door, then on the hook beside the coat rack. Then in the upstairs hallway outside the second bedroom, which he had claimed without asking by simply moving the tin puzzle from the floor to the shelf and placing his blanket on the narrow bed. He closed the door behind him when he went to sleep, which is the kind of thing that sounds small until you realize that closing a door requires believing the room on the other side of it will still be there when you open it again. He started exploring the property with the restless energy of a boy whose legs had been folded into car seats and gas station parking lots for too long. He found the spring and named it. He found a flat rock near the walnut stand where he sat after school and did his homework. He found a walking stick leaning against the back of the house, smooth and worn, and probably Mercer's, Quoz, and he carried it everywhere for a week before leaving it beside the front door alongside his mother's car key, as if both objects belonged to the same category of things that stay. One evening, a month after they arrived, Corinne walked upstairs to check on him. He was lying on the bed reading one of the books from the shelf, a children's adventure story with a cracked spine and yellowed pages that had been sitting on that shelf since 1950. His shoes were beside the bed, not on his feet, not clutched against his chest, beside the bed, toes forward, laces tucked in, and next to the shoes, placed carefully on the floor, was the framed photograph of the 3 of them at the county fair. Corinne gripped the door frame. She gripped it the way a person grips a railing on a ship when the ocean shifts beneath them. It's because that photograph had not left Brio's backpack since the night they were evicted. He had carried it against his body for weeks. He had slept on top of it. He had guarded it the way children guard the last proof that their family once existed, in a form that made sense. And now it was on the floor beside a bed, in a room, in a house, on a mountain. He had unpacked his father. That meant he believed they were staying, and that single act of trust, from a 9-year-old boy who had learned not to trust, nearly broke Corinne Hale in half. 6 months later, the mountain house looked like someone had reached backward through time and pulled forward only the things worth keeping. Clayton had returned twice. Once to repair the porch support beam, which he replaced with locust wood he milled himself. Soon once to reglaze the windows after Corinne removed the interior shutters and let light into every room for the first time since 1950. The glass was original, wavy, and imperfect. and it turned the mountain light into something liquid that moved across the floor in slow golden shapes that shifted with the angle of the sun. The county had accepted Emmett's boundary correction in February. 63 acres confirmed. The 16 acres the mining company had tried to steal through a manufactured survey in 1953 were restored to the Vale property. The spring was protected. The walnut stood intact except for 3 trees that had been selectively harvested by a logger named Prescott, who paid a fair price and did clean work, and shook Corinne's hand when he was finished and said, "Your grandmother would approve of how you handled this." The money from the walnut covered Clayton's roofing bill, a new well pump, basic plumbing repairs, and 6 months of groceries. It was not wealth, it was stability. The difference between those two things is something most people do not understand until they have lived without both. Corinne did not live lavishly. She enrolled Brio in the county school system. She found part-time work at a plant nursery in town, a job that paid modestly but allowed her to be home by 3:30 when the school bus dropped Brio at the bottom of the mountain road. She opened a bank account. She paid the property taxes on time using Odessa's records to ensure the assessed value was accurate. She never called Lorene. She never called Wade. She did not send them photographs. She did not compose the speech she had rehearsed during those 2 nights in the car. Revenge requires an audience. Recovery does not. Some people remain exactly who they are, no matter what you survive. Lorene would still be in her beige living room with her pearl earrings and her clean cruelty. Wade would still be leaning against door frames, confusing comfort with wisdom. They had not broken Corinne. They had shown her what they were, and what they were had nothing to do with what she was becoming. The deeper change was quieter. Corinne stopped feeling ashamed of needing help. She stopped apologizing for the years she spent caregiving. She stopped confusing other people's rejection with her own value. On a warm evening in April, Corinne sat on the porch in the rocking chair with the green shawl across her lap. She had mended the moth-eaten edges with thread from the general store and a needle from Odessa's sewing box, which also contained a thimble, a pair of scissors, and a lock of hair tied with a ribbon that Corinne placed back without unfolding, because some private things should remain private even after the person who kept them is gone. Brio came out onto the porch. He was taller than 6 months ago, his face fuller. His eyes, which had been 2 shades too old for a 9-year-old when they arrived, had softened back toward childhood. He sat on the steps and looked at the ridge where the walnut trees stood against the evening sky. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "Did Odessa know we were coming?" Corinne looked at her son. She thought about the letters, the deeds hidden in a pantry, the survey map sealed in a lockbox. She thought about a woman who lost her husband and refused to sell, and not because she was brave in the simple way people use that word, but because she understood that keeping records is a form of resistance that outlasts the people doing the pressuring. "I think she hoped someone would come," Corinne said, "someone who had lost enough to understand what she was protecting." Brio looked at the house, at the mended porch, at the clear windows, at the smoke curling from the chimney where Corinne had built a fire that morning, using wood Emmett had dropped off the week before. "I'm glad it was us," he said. Corinne pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. The mountain air was cool, but not cold. The trees moved. The creak was audible from the porch if she held still enough to listen. The house behind her was lit from inside, due warm and solid, and present in a way that no structure she had lived in since Garrick's death had ever been, because this house was not rented or borrowed or temporary. This house was hers, built by her grandfather, protected by her grandmother, sealed for 74 years against exactly the kind of season she had just walked through. She thought about what she would say if Odessa could hear her now. "You were right, Grandma. They tried to make humiliation feel like the only truth I had left. But I found your letters. I found the spring and the walnut and the 63 acres and the warning you wrote for a woman you would never meet. And I am sitting on your porch with your shawl on my lap, and my son just asked if you knew we were coming. The answer is yes. You knew." And maybe that is the truth hidden inside stories like this one. That sometimes what looks abandoned is not empty, that sometimes what looks finished still holds a future, that the women who build quietly in pantries and locked rooms are the ones who save the families that come after them, and that the greatest inheritance is never the money or the land. It is the moment a frightened woman stops believing she is a burden and finally opens the right door. If this story reminded you of someone who gave more than she was given, share it with the person who needs to hear it tonight. Drop their name in the comments. Tell us who that woman was for you. Your words might reach somebody sitting alone right now, wondering if they still matter. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. We are here every week with stories of strength, survival, loss, and the quiet power of people the world counts out too early. The next story is already waiting.